guys, welcome to my channel, Patterns by D. My name is D, and today's tutorial is on the fancy flare dress. This is my fourth pattern, but the first one for 2025. And if you haven't subscribed already, please hit that subscribe button and that notification bell for upcoming videos and tutorials. Now, this dress is very elegant, and also you could wear it as a casual dress as well. It's almost like I would say a shirt dress. It's snug around the waist and also around the arm of the sleeve. Now it has a lot of flare to it because I added 2 panels for the front and the back to give the dress extra flare. If you would like to add gathers or pleats, that's up to you. That is optional for this dress around the waist. Now it has pockets. You don't have to add pockets if you don't like to. You can also lengthen the dress to make it shorter or longer. Now the hack of this pattern where you can make it as a coat or a jacket as well. Now this dress is easy to assemble. It is beginner friendly. It has 12 pieces, but like I said, if you follow the instructions to a T, you'll be fine. And for the materials that you would need to assemble this dress, you would need buttons or snaps for the closures, and also woven interfacing for the collar and the front and back waistband. Now, I use tracing paper to trace my pattern pieces on my fabric. I'll put all the information down in the description box below. These are the fabrics that will go well with this pattern. And with further ado, let's get started assembling this dress. And I'm also going to use my pattern wheel. And this is the side I'm going to use, and this is just the other side of the paper. So first you'll put it under your pattern and you're going to press down with your pattern wheel to whatever size you want to trace out on your fabric. I'm tracing out a size 10. And just put a little amount of pressure. Okay, now we're going to talk about the pattern pieces that you're going to have to cut out for this dress. Now, I'm going to cut out all the pieces. Now, you don't have to if you want to. The extra 2 pieces are for the side and the back extra side panel pieces to give the dress extra flare. But let's first start off by cutting pattern piece number 1, which is the front bodice. You're going to have to cut 2 pieces of fabric. And also, you're going to have to attach woven interfacing at the center front of your both pieces for your buttonholes. And this is an inch wide. So you just have to make it the length of the front and an inch wide. And you're going to do that for both pieces. And also, don't forget to mark your dot placements for your dart and your notches. Okay, pattern piece number 2 is the back bodice. You're gonna have to cut 1 piece of fabric on the fold. And also don't forget to place your dot for your dart markings and your notches for your shoulder, your arm, and your side seam. Okay, pattern piece number 3 is the collar. You're gonna have to cut 2 pieces of fabric on the fold and also 1 interfacing. You're gonna have to also attach interfacing to just 1 of the pieces of the collar since you're cutting 2 on the fold. And don't forget to mark your dots for your seam allowance to your size that you're going to cut out, and also the notch for the shoulder seam. Okay, pattern piece number 4 is the pocket. You're going to have to cut out 4 pieces of fabric, and also don't forget to cut out your notches for your pocket opening and also on the side of the pocket. Pattern piece number 5 is the front waistband. You're gonna have to cut out 4 pieces of fabric and cut out 2 pieces of interfacing because you're going to interface 2 pieces of your back waistband. Also, don't forget to notch on the sides and the top of your size, and also your dot placements for your seam allowance at the center front and also mark where your button and buttonhole are going to be placed. Pattern piece number 6 is the back waistband, and you're going to cut out 4 pieces of fabric, and you're also going to interface 2 pieces of those fabric pieces. Also, don't forget to place your dot markings for your seam allowance of where you're going to attach your belt, and we're about to talk about that in a minute. And also, don't forget to mark your notch. Pattern piece number 7 is the sleeve, and you have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric. Don't forget to mark your notches and notch where your fold is going to go for your hem of your sleeve. And also, you're going to gather some stitches when we attach the sleeve to the front and back bodice at the arm arc of your top, and we'll get to that later. Pattern piece number 8 is the belt, and you're going to cut out 4 pieces of fabric. And also, don't forget to mark your dots at the center back of your belt so you can attach it to the back waistband of your dress. Pattern piece number 9 is the front skirt. You're going to have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric. And at the center front of your pieces, you're going to also add some interfacing, 1 inch wide, and the length of the front of the skirt for both pieces. And also, don't forget to mark where your pocket opening is going to go. And also, we're going to gather up here at the top waist of the skirt as well, so we'll get to that too. For pattern piece 9A, this is the front skirt side panel, and this is extra piece where you can add extra flare to your dress. And you're going to have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric. Okay, for pattern piece number 10, which is the back skirt, you're going to have to cut 1 on the fold. And also, don't forget to mark where your pocket opening will go. And for your extra piece, this is the skirt side, the back skirt side panel, pattern piece 10A. And you could attach this for extra flare to pattern piece number 10. And also, don't forget to mark your notches for your pocket opening. Okay, now that you have all 12 pieces of your pattern cut out, let's start putting all of the pieces together. And we're going to start off first with the top piece of your dress. Now with the extra threads on top of your dart, make sure you tie those 2 to 3 times to secure your dart from coming open, and also press your dart towards the side seam. Okay, now that you have finished attaching your darts on the front bodice, now we're going to work on the placket at the center front of your bodice. You should have made 3 notches at the neck edge and at the waist edge to indicate where you should make your folds for your placket. Your first fold will be 1/4 of an inch at the center front, and then fold it over the interfacing 1 inch over. And then from starting at the very top edge, the neck edge of your placket, you're going to stitch down 1/8 of an inch close to the edge, and you're going to stop 3 inches above the waist edge. You're going to stop your stitches 3 inches from the waist edge. Okay, now that we have sandwiched all the pieces together, the belt and the back waistband, which pieces are interfaced, we're going to stitch it a 1/2 inch seam allowance from the center back edge. Starting at the top, back stitch, going all the way across. It's pretty thick, so take your time. And now you're going to back stitch at the bottom. And now we're going to press our seam allowance open, flat, just like that. Okay, now that we have finished applying the back waistband to the belt at the center back, now we're going to take pattern piece number 5, which is the front waistband. And we're going to take both interface pieces, put the other 2 aside, and we're going to attach them with right side spacing. The interface pieces flat as well. Okay, now that you have attached your front waistbands to your back waistband and also attached your belt. Now with right sides facing, we're going to attach your top bodice piece to the belt. And remember, you have to leave at least 3 inches open at the waist edge of your placket at the center front of your bodice so you can attach your waistband. Place it together with right sides facing with the waistband. So make sure you attach your waistband with the bodice to the center front edge, the side seam. These are the places you're going to pin first. The center back, make sure you move the belt out of the way and pin the side seam. And the other side of the band. And all your notches should be matching with each other. And now you're going to pin everything in place. Back stitch at the very end. All right. Now you're going to press the seam allowance inside of your waistband. So you're going to press it down just like that. Now grab pattern piece number 9, which is the front skirt. If you're not going to add the side panel, then you're going to add the pockets to the front of the skirt on the side. Now I'm going to attach 9A to pattern piece number 9 at the side where the pocket was going to go for pattern piece number 9. But I'm going to add the pocket on the side seam of pattern piece 9A. And I'm going to do that for the back panel skirt, which is pattern piece 10A, and pattern piece 10, which is the back of the skirt. So like I'm going to do for the front of the skirt, I'm going to do for the back of the skirt. And for the pattern pieces for the front of the skirt, you should have added an inch wide interfacing the whole length of the front of the skirt piece on both pieces. And you're going to do that for all 4 pocket pieces. You're going to stitch now 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way down to the bottom dot of your pocket. I'm going to back stitch. Now you're going to press it, and you're going to do a under stitch, which is on the wrong side, close to the seam. But I'm going to do it on top with right sides of the fabric facing me. I'm going to do a top edge stitch, 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Back stitch, and you're going to stop at that dot. Don't go all the way down, like you see here, all the way up. Okay, now that you have attached your pocket pieces to the side seam of your skirt, now you're going to place the front and the back together with right sides facing. With right sides facing, this is the front of the dress, and I'm attaching it to the back at the side seam. is you're going to cut from the stitching a 1/4 inch away from the stitching. You're going to cut right across, but stop. Don't stop right at that 1/4 inch fold over. Stop right there. Okay. Then we're going to fold it over just like that. So you'll see, you see where that opening is, this opening here. You're going to put your scissors in between that, cut the top off just like that. And then you're going to go up and then cut up, because you're going to leave some of the fabric. You're not going to cut it all off at the edge. You're going to leave a 1/4 inch opening. I mean 1/4 inch length of the fabric here. So cut that off a little bit at an angle so you can fold it inside out. Okay, now that you have stitched it across 1 inch away from the edge, you had to cut away. I cut it away already, but don't cut it all the way like you see here. Don't cut it all the way to the edge. Leave some fabric here so you can tuck it in when you flip this inside out. Okay, so let's flip this and just fold that and flip it inside out just like that. Take your pointer and push it through, and then straight down, back stitch, Now, if I turn this over, you see I caught the edge of the band underneath. I'm going to take the needle and stop it, put it through the stitching. Now it's time to gather. Okay, so now we're going to do the gathering stitches, and you're going to do 3 groups of gathering stitches, starting from one side of the skirt at the center front to the side seam, and then from the side seam across the center back of your skirt to the other side seam, and then from the side seam to the center front again. So that's 3 groups of gathering stitches. With right side spacing, you're going to attach your bodice to your skirt waist edge and start pinning at the side seams, at the center back, and also at the front center front placket, matching the notches. And then you're going to pull your gathering stitches in between each area that you pinned. Okay, now to stitch in the ditch, I'm going to change my presser foot to letter R, which has this piece in the middle of the split foot of my pressure foot piece. It has right here where this will go in the seam of the garment. So the needle, let me show you. Take this one off. I'll put this one on. Okay. And I'm going to stitch in the ditch, which is to stitch in the seam of the waistband, so I can attach the uninterfaced piece of the waistband on the wrong side of the fabric. So I'm going to insert, and make sure this piece here is in the seam of your waistband. I'm going to insert my needle, and let me see, make sure, okay. Lift it up so you can see, okay. And I'm going to use this guide here in the middle of the pressure foot to guide me through my seam. Back stitch. Alright, so as you see here, it's stitched in the ditch, and when you turn it over, you see I caught my uninterfaced piece all the way across. Alright, so now we're going to close our band up here where you have left it open here. We're going to fold it and close it up. Okay, now the uninterfaced band on the wrong side of your fabric is attached. Like I said, you could have done a slip stitch or stitch in the ditch, which I just did a stitch in a ditch. Now we're going to close in the band on the wrong side at the placket. We're going to fold this over, and you can take this to your ironing board and press this flat, and then we're going to stitch it closed, and we're going to do this on both sides. Okay, now that you have pressed your band over to cover up your uninterfaced piece on the wrong side on the inside of your dress, now we're going to pin it closed, and then we're going to do a top stitching on the right side of your dress. So make sure everything is pressed nicely and flat. And then we will add our buttonholes and we will be done. And you're going to do the same thing for the other side. You're going to edge stitch here all the way down to where you had to stop on the front of the skirt. We're just going to close our band up, and then I'm going to do it on the top so I can follow my stitch all the way down to where I stopped at on my skirt. And then we'll add our buttonholes. Now we're going to stitch our band closed.